Hello and welcome into Cowboys Overtime, presented by Window Nation. Shout out to our friends at Window Nation. I am Nick Harris. Mac Engel decided to dip out and not join us this week. We'll pressure him about it next week. Probably get him to talk on the abolishment that he did not show up today. But we have a lot to talk about this last weekend of football. It was a busy weekend of football, not only in Dallas and in DFW, but all across the state of Texas. We could start with the Cowboys win over the Buccaneers last night. It's largely interesting because you look at this win on the surface and it really doesn't mean anything, because going into this game, the Cowboys already knew that their playoff chances were thrown out of the window with the Commanders coming back and beating the Eagles last night up in D.C. in a wild game. And we'll talk about the Eagles a little bit later and how that might affect going into next week's game for the Cowboys. But the Cowboys were eliminated before the game even started. So knowing that going into the game, talking to a couple of players after the game in the locker room, they said, yeah, I was watching it on my phone as I was pulling up to the stadium. And then, it was like, okay, let's go ruin as many teams' seasons as we can. That's what Brock Hoffman had to say, starting right guard. And they did exactly that going in to AT&T Stadium last night, defeating the Buccaneers 26-24. I do have to give credit to this offense and even the offensive play caller, Mike McCarthy, in this game specifically, because going up against a Tampa Bay defense that stacks the box more than any other team in the NFL, they knew that the consistency that they've built off of Rico Dowdle over the course of the last 3 weeks, him getting over 100 yards in each of the last 3 weeks, they knew that they were not going to have those same opportunities going into this game. Tampa Bay, they love to load the box. They're the 11th best rush defense in the entire NFL. But on the flip side, they're the 30th best pass defense, so third worst in the NFL. There were going to be some opportunities there for Cooper Rush and this offense to get going. Now, they win the coin toss. They take the opening possession, and then they start to build confidence for Cooper Rush. They run bunch formations on the opening drive. Cooper Rush goes 6 for 6 for 21 yards, just quick game, trying to build confidence for that quarterback and that offense and that passing game. And they did just that. And they took the lead on that opening possession, and they never relinquished it throughout the entire game. You have to give credit to the offensive play caller, the decision makers in that process, to be able to say, hey, we need to take the ball. We need to build some confidence for this quarterback. We need to make sure that this passing game can get going so that we are not playing from behind at any point. And especially knowing that they were not going to have the run game most likely at their disposal, and that's exactly what happened. They only finished with 31 rushing yards. They did really well. And then you have to look on the defensive side, being able to have impact plays from Jordan Lewis, a huge interception in the end zone that he ripped away from the rookie Jalen McMillan. And then in the final possession of the game, Deron Bland being able to rip away a fumble from Rachaad White on the Tampa Bay's best opportunity to take the lead all night, and it came in the game's final minute. A really good job by this defensive crew for a Tampa Bay team that is averaging more points on the road than any other team in the NFL coming into this with 31.6 points. They limit them to 24. And complementary football really benefited both sides of the football in this one. And as far as implications go, again, this win was largely for nothing. But you ask players in the locker room after the game, there's still a lot to play for. There are a lot of guys that are playing on contract years. There are a lot of guys that are trying to build a little bit more of a resume before they hit that free agency in 2025. And, that kind of goes on to our next point of guys like Jordan Lewis, guys like Osa Odigizua, guys like Chauncey Golston. They are starting to build a price tag going into these next few games that is going to make it very interesting for the Cowboys during this offseason. You look at Jordan Lewis's play as specifically, they were able to sign him for almost a veteran minimum last year on a one-year deal to bring him back and have him start at nickel corner. And not only has he been healthy and available for every game this season, which was huge, him, starting to turn the page to his 30s, him being able to be available was the biggest factor, but also him having his best season since he arrived with the Cowboys 8 years ago. I think that's probably the biggest development for this defense. You look at what he has brought, how he has been able to play, and how he's been able to be an impact player. He's played at a Pro Bowl level, potentially at an All-Pro level. I'm curious to see what the respect around the league ends up being for him when it's all said and done. But you look at a guy like that price tag is only going to go up. And you look at the 26 free agents that this Cowboys team will have whenever that league year hits on March 14th. You look at guys like Jordan Lewis, and man, that's going to be a tough one to be able to figure out. I think it's going to make you have to make some tough decisions with guys like Zach Martin, guys like DeMarcus Lawrence, guys like Brandon Cooks. How do you factor all of these guys in? You can look at Rico Dowdle, him being able to have the 3 games of 100 yards consecutively over the course of the last month. That's huge, and he's going into a contract year. He's most likely going to command something in the $3 to $4 million per year range. Can the Cowboys be able to withstand that? And then Osa Odighizuwa, Chauncey Golston, Carl Lawson, Eric Kendricks, the list goes on. These are all impact players that have been a big reason why this team has been able to stack 4 wins in the last 5 weeks. And if you're looking for confidence to build on going into 2025 and you want to find some consistent factors to make sure that this momentum that they have kind of generated over the course of the last month carries into next season, because that's obviously going to be the mindset now with playoff hopes out of the equation, then you have to be able to bring some of those consistent factors back. And that's going to be the task of the front office to be able to figure out is, hey, what can we do financially to be able to bring as many of these impact players back as we can so that we can make sure that consistency is created going into 2025. Because I think if you look at, the biggest things that harped this team going into 2024 was that there wasn't a ton of consistency, and there was a lot still being figured out in those first few weeks. You had a new defensive play caller. You had a new defensive communicator in Eric Kendricks. You had new faces on the defensive line. You had new faces in the secondary. Even it was tough. You had a couple of guys returning from injury. There wasn't consistency until week 8, week 9 of the season, and now we started to see what that consistency has brought to the rest of the team. And you could say the same thing offensively. Now I think offense, there's still going to have to be some major changes made there. I think, the Mike McCarthy discussion is a larger one that we'll get into here in a bit, but, does the play caller stay the same? Does certain factors stay the same as far as offensive line coach, running back coach? And if those things change, that's going to create schematic changes as well. And how can they adapt to that going into 2025? Because I do feel like there might need to be some larger implications factored in there whenever that does come around. But we'll take a quick break and hear from our friends at Window Nation.
Window Nation, the star of window replacement and proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys, can help you fill the house this season with savings. Buy 2 windows, get 2 free, and make no interest payments for 60 months, 5 full years. Fill your house for a customized authentic Dallas Cowboys jersey while supplies last. You could even help fill the Cowboys house and win tickets to a game. Visit windownation.com/Cowboys now for details. Call 866-95-NATION. Window Nation, proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Mike McCarthy, he has been the topic of discussion for most of the year. He's coaching out his final year of his 5-year contract with the team. And when this team was 3-7 off of a 5-game losing streak, it seemed that his fate was all but written going into the offseason of, okay, hey, it's time to start looking around. We got to look at Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, this, that, and the third. And now you look at 4 wins in 5 weeks. Has Mike McCarthy saved his job? And I think the answer is yes. You look at what Jerry Jones has been communicating, Stephen Jones has been communicating over the course of the last few weeks in their public availabilities and their radio availabilities. They are preaching nothing but confidence in McCarthy going into these final 2 games and then going into his free agency in the offseason. I think you look at Jerry Jones' excitement after that win last night, and he preaches about the fight that this team has. He credits the culture and the coaching staff. I think a decision is close to being made about Mike McCarthy returning, not only for 2025, but an extension being done over the offseason to bring him back for the foreseeable future. And, what does that look like from an offensive standpoint? Is there a deal that has to be made maybe where he comes back, but they need to bring in a different offensive play caller? I think those discussions still do need to be had at the end of the day, because at times this offense has been stagnant, and the running game being able to pick up how it has over the course of the last 4 weeks. Granted, it did not last night against Tampa Bay, but Rico Dowdle's emergence has helped this offense quite a bit. Mike McCarthy's offense is predicated around the running game being able to produce and it being able to find some consistency. With that in hand, it has helped Mike McCarthy as a play caller, don't get me wrong, but the lack of creativity, the stagnant play sometimes. I mean, you look at last night, 4 straight punts in the fourth quarter that allowed Tampa Bay the opportunity to score at the end and potentially win that game. I think you need an offensive play caller next year that brings a little bit more creativity and also can just know how to play it from ahead. There's been multiple opportunities over the course of this last few weeks where they've won 4 out of the last 5, where they've allowed teams to creep back in. You think back to the Washington game, obviously this Tampa Bay game, where in the final moments, these teams had opportunities to win, and that would not have happened had the offense just been able to keep the ball, hold on to the ball, and finish the game with points. I mean, you look at the Bengals game, 4.5 minutes left in that game. They get the ball at the 40-yard line. They get a 11-yard rush with Rico Dowdle, and then they go pass, incomplete. And it leads to the Bengals eventually winning that game. You have to put that on the offensive play caller. So if Mike McCarthy is back, which I think he will be at this point, you're looking at reading the tea leaves and understanding what Jerry Jones is communicating, I think there still needs to be a conversation had about the offensive play caller. Now, on the other side of the ball, defense coordinator Mike Zimmer, I think he is starting to prove his value and his worth as far as bringing him back as well. You look at the first half of the season, and it was absolutely awful. It was putrid as far as how this defense was not able to stop the run, how they were consistently allowing big plays in the pass game. And it was a complex scheme. You had every player in that locker room telling you that, hey, there's a lot going on. That it's very detail oriented, and guys are not paying attention to the details. Guys are not sticking to their assignments. They're trying to play hero ball, as Michael Parsons put earlier in the year. But now you look in this back half of the season, specifically over these last 5 games, you see the pass rush thriving. You see guys staying in their pass rush lanes. You see the run defense being able to limit big production. I mean, Bucky Irving, running back for the Buccaneers last night, there was no reason why he couldn't have gone for 100 yards had this rush defense not been playing at the level it had been playing over the course of the last month. And I think you have to give that credit to Mike Zimmer. And you look at how he's unleashed Donovan Wilson as a situational blitzer from the safety position. He's gotten in the sack category in 3 out of the last 4 games, which coming from that third level, it's pretty impressive. You can't discount that ability to be able to do that for number 6. And you have to give that credit to Mike Zimmer. I think with a full offseason with mostly consistent personnel on all 3 levels, both on the defensive front, linebackers, and safeties, I think Mike Zimmer could have a defense ready in week 1 of 2025 to be ready to go, unlike how they were this year. And I think that would be a major difference for the potential of this team moving forward as well. Stepping aside from the Cowboys, looking at the college football playoff first round this past weekend, 2 Texas teams in the mix over the course of the weekend. Texas hosting Clemson at home down in Austin, and SMU traveling up to Happy Valley to take on Penn State. We'll start with SMU, with that being chronologically the first game that happened. It was a tough outing for the Mustangs, and they were completely overwhelmed by the environment. You look at the loss and 38-10. The 2 pick sixes in the first half did not help Kevin Jennings and this offense. Even when they had opportunities to drive down the field, it was immediately eradicated by turnovers. And then the third turnover, where he threw an interception right at the goal line, it eventually led to another Penn State score. It just kind of put it out of reach before it could even get going. But, talking about this SMU program, just to be at this stage is a huge accomplishment for the Mustangs. And I think, moving forward with the NIL era in full effect, and SMU, we've known for 40 years that they can pony up the money, no pun intended, when it's time. And I think SMU is going to get ready to do that. You see how they have had success in the portal over the course of the last couple of weeks. You see the success that they have had in recruiting DFW. I think SMU is going to be a contender, not only in the ACC, but I think if you look forward 5 years from now and they're able to stack this confidence, and if Rhett Lashley sticks around head coach for the Mustangs, then I think you could see them start to be a contender. But I think it's too early to do that. And you saw that because they go up to Penn State, really tough environment, a power program, even though they've had their fair share of losses over the course of the last few years. But it's still a power program, and they play up to a certain level, a certain standard. SMU's not quite there yet. But there's no reason to believe why 3-4 years from now they should not be in that discussion each and every year. They have the resources to do it. It's just about putting those resources in the right place, because there's a lot of teams around the country that don't put the resources in the right place, and it ends up in disappointment every year. Look at a team like Miami; they couldn't even squeak into the 12-team playoff this year with a Heisman contender at quarterback and a strong running game with 2 running backs, strong defense. You just have to be able to know where to allocate the resources. And at least the early indications is that SMU is starting to figure out where to allocate those resources, and it's starting to benefit them. It's just maybe not benefiting them in the playoff picture just yet. And then later in the day, Texas being able to defeat Clemson 38-24. Got to give credit to that run game, and specifically running backs coach Tashard Choice, who is a former Dallas Cowboy. At the beginning of the season, they lose 2 running backs to a torn ACL in fall camp. And before the season even starts, they are already having to figure out their depth chart at the running back position. They're scrambling. They ended up taking a very, very late transfer from a guy who expected to be done playing football in Velton Gardner. He hasn't played much this season, but that just goes to speak how much that depth was really tested at the running back position before the year even started. And now you look up almost 14 weeks later, and they have 2 running backs in a college football playoff game go over 100 yards. You have Jaden Blue that accounts for 177 total yards, and Quintravion Wisener, the DeSoto product, accounting for 110. This running game is humming right now. And I wrote about it after the game. You know, there's a lot of discussion around Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning, who should be the guy that starts for Texas. And I really don't think it matters. I think their ceiling is the same no matter who the quarterback is. And that ceiling is a national championship. And the floor is losing at any point in this playoffs. And I think that's all predicated on the run game. You look at the 2 games that Texas has lost this season, and you see 64.5 rushing yards per game in those 2 games against Georgia. And they were not able to get the running game sustained in either of those contests, and it ended up leading to losses. And I think as far as this team can go is dependent on how far this running game goes. And that starts with the matchup against Arizona State in the Peach Bowl on January 1st. And if they win that one, they will be right at AT&T Stadium playing in the national semifinal and the Cotton Bowl. So we'll be sure to stay locked in with that. And moving on to picks for this weekend, we got the Cowboys playing the Philadelphia Eagles, which while we are on this podcast here, it's been announced that game is actually going to be slotted up to a noon game on Sunday up in Pennsylvania at Lincoln Financial Field. This is an interesting one. You look at Jalen Hurts coming out of the game yesterday against Washington with a concussion, and backup quarterback Kenny Pickett coming into the game. Eagles end up blowing the lead and losing that game. If Jalen Hurts maybe makes a difference there, then maybe we're having a different discussion here today. But that's going to be certainly something to keep an eye on going into the week is Jalen Hurts' health. So if Jalen Hurts is not playing in this game, I think with the way the Cowboys have played and the way that they've been fighting, they have a chance to win this ball game. However, I think one key factor is going to play into this week. You know, they didn't know that they were not going to be into the playoffs until they showed up to AT&T Stadium yesterday. How does the approach in the week leading up to this game against Philadelphia now take effect, knowing that, hey, in a couple weeks, I'm out of here? Are they already starting to plan vacations? Where's the intention behind planning and preparing over the course of this week? It's going to be a lot different now that you know that you don't have a shot going into the weekend. I like the Eagles in this one for a multitude of reasons, but I think it could be a toss-up if Jalen Hurts is not playing in this one. We appreciate you joining us here on Star Telegram's Cowboys Overtime, presented by Window Nation. We'll get on Mac next week for not making it out, but for me, Nick Harris, and Candy Bolden, the producer behind, we'll see you next week.